Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of Random Vlogging. I'm in a massive amount of pain right now that I will explain the entirety behind that in a separate video because I don't want to take away or detract from the importance of what I want to say here. And what I want to talk about is the recent change to the YouTube partnership program and what I see as the inherent issues with what they're doing and what the long-term effects of this from an economic standpoint are going to be. And the reason I'm making this video, Hank Green, who is a brilliant person in general, and also happens to be a phenomenal YouTube creator. He's the owner of VidCon. Him and his brother John are the people that created VidCon. And they're also one of the biggest names on YouTube. So he's someone whose opinion on this I tend to value over a lot of other people because, first of all, he has a ton of experience on YouTube, having been doing this since YouTube, pretty close to when YouTube first started. He was one of the original creators that kind of built their way up into kind of an empire almost that he runs now. And he also is one of the people that helped create the Internet Creators Guild, which is kind of a the closest thing you might be able to compare it to is kind of like a union for YouTubers, but it's not really that. It's basically, you know, a way for a bunch of YouTubers to get together so that their voices can be heard better because they are conglomerating, which is what unions are supposed to be, but again, that word has connotations behind it, and what unions are now are very different than when they were first created and things like that. And so, but anyway, so I value his opinion greatly, and he tweeted, and I'm going to see if I can find the tweet really quick here, because it was to me the most shocking thing I have seen him. I think I've ever seen him tweet. And it, come on. Right here. This is the tweet. I saw it retweeted from someone else because for whatever reason I'm not following Hank Green, which I just fixed that on Twitter. But he tweeted this about 3 hours ago. The fact that you don't make money from your creative projects does not mean that they're not valued or valuable. And when I first read this, my first response, my gut reaction, was Hank Green is going to bat for YouTube instead of creators, which is the exact opposite stance that I've seen the Green brothers take literally in every other aspect of their public persona. They have very much always been a very creator-first group, and you know that's why he helped create the Internet Creators Guild, to help give people a collective voice and to help influence YouTube for the betterment of the creators themselves, instead of YouTube mainly focusing on what is best for them only as a company and not really caring about creators at all. So, and then, you know, VidCon is a celebration of YouTube creators and things like that. Like, so my vision of Hank and John Green has always been they're very creator focused, and they're very much on the side of creators. And that statement itself just really sounds like he's trying to defend what YouTube has done with this new monetization thing, where if you're not aware, if you want to be a YouTube partner, which as of right now, I am currently a YouTube partner and have been for over 3 years. This is, I think, my 703rd or 704th video I've made and released on this channel. I also have, I don't know, a couple dozen at least videos on another channel I helped start. It as a collaboration channel that's kind of dead now, called the All for Geek Alliance. But I think it's safe to say that I have a fair amount of experience in releasing content. I have created a crap ton of content for YouTube, a lot of it long-form content, which is what they really, really want. However, I do not meet the criteria going forward. So as of February 20th, I will no longer be a YouTube partner. You have to have at least 1,000 subscribers, which I'm about 800 short. Despite some really wonderful, amazing people from Team Human starting to subscribe to my channel. And then you also need 4,000 hours of view time on your videos over the last 12 months. In the last 12 months, I've got about 20,000 minutes of view time, which turns into something like 341 and change hours. So I am shy of that goal by over 3,500 hours. So if I want to remain a YouTube partner, I have to get roughly about 800 subscribers in about 30 days, and I have to get roughly about 3,500 hours of time watched on my channel alone, which is not impossible. I have enough content on my channel that if I got 800 new subscribers and they watched basically 2 to 3 episodes of any of my D&D games, which, let's see, Tyranny of Dragons lasted, I think, 23 or 24 episodes. Kingdom of the Kale Isles is, I think, into its 50s. It's in its 50s in episodes. So it's theoretically possible that could happen. It's just not very probable. So, again, I've been rambling a little bit because that's what I do. But the thing I wanted to address is something, shortly after making this tweet, the fact that you don't make money from your creative projects does not mean that they are not valued or valuable. Again, that thing blew my mind because, again, that is a very... In my mind, that is a very anti-creator sentiment. That is basically saying, hey, listen, you should work for free. And just because you're working for free, it doesn't mean that what you're doing isn't valuable. And that goes against, again, in my mind, which is different from reality. Again, my opinion and my view of Hank Green is not the real Hank Green because I don't know Hank Green. I've never spoken with the gentleman. I've never had a conversation with him. I've never even had a Twitter conversation with him where I've said something or he said something, I've replied, and then he's replied back. Like, my interactions with Hank Green are nothing. So I don't actually know the guy. I just had an image in my mind from the actions that he has taken. And this just seems to go so far against what I thought of Hank Green that I was blown away. So shortly after that, roughly about an hour after that, he wrote another tweet. He said, I'm looking for people who want to talk to me about YouTube policy on a live Google Hangout in a half an hour. Apply here. And I didn't see that until far too late, and due to everything else that's happening, there was no way I would have been able to be involved in it anyways. But he had about 4 people on there. I think a 5th person joined at the very end. I had to skip out of the last, I think, about 5 to 10 minutes of it. But Hank started talking about his point of view on the topic. And his point of view was basically that a lot of us thought that when this happened, this was a response to the Logan Paul controversy and the other big controversies that have been happening on YouTube, like PewDiePie and basically all the stuff that the Wall Street Journal has been doing hit pieces about specifically targeting YouTuber and getting advertisers to remove their ads from YouTube. That was our gut reaction because it's happened so soon after that. And according to Hank Green, he's like, no, stuff like, based on what I know, he knows about how YouTube works, stuff like this takes months to go into effect. So this happened before the Jake Paul thing was even a thing, which I have to take his word for, despite the fact that from a business standpoint, that doesn't make 100% sense to me. Again, I am a businessman. That's my expertise. I am 3 courses. I'm 3 courses away from a degree in business, and my last 2 courses I have actually tested out of because I already knew all the material in them. And these are 300-400 level business courses that I already, just from my own personal knowledge of being in the business world and the experiences that I had being in management, already knew. So I think it's safe to say that I can be considered an expert on business and things like that. So anyway, I have to take his word for it because I don't know anyone at YouTube and I don't know the work environment at YouTube or their verification process or anything like that. One thing I do know about YouTube, and it is incredibly obvious for anyone that studies business, is that YouTube currently is in a very reactionary management, uses a very reactionary management style, from the higher ups all the way down to their lowers. They are very reactionary. What does that mean? That means they react to what is happening, and make changes based on what has already happened. The opposite of that is what's called an anticipatory management style, where what you do is you anticipate what could happen and start making plans and put things in place to either prevent bad things from happening before they happen, or to encourage good things or things you want to happen before they actually are doing it, before your customers are actually doing the things you want them to do. In a reactionary management style, you wait for either for something bad to happen or something good to happen and then go, oh, I don't like that, so I'm now going to take steps to make sure that doesn't happen again. Or, ooh, I do like that, I'm going to take steps to make sure that that does happen again. And like I said, the anticipatory one is, okay, there's a possibility of this happening, so I'm going to take some steps to ensure that this doesn't happen, or that if it does happen, we have a plan in place already to make sure that the damage is as little as possible, or this is the way we want our customers interacting with us, this is what we want, this is the good thing that we want to happen, what steps can we take to make this good thing happen? And in the business world, reactionary management is a failing business plan. It always is. It always has been. Reactionary management, generally in a healthy business culture, reactionary management is reserved entirely. Reactionary management decisions are made entirely in a crisis period, where even with all of your anticipatory things and other things, something bad happens and now you have to play damage control. That is where reaction management is in a healthy business, and that's the only time it ever happens, is if you are in something unexpected happened and you have to play damage control. If, however, your entire business is based on a reactionary measure, you will have a failing business. Reactionary management cannot sustain a business. It is completely unsustainable. You have to eventually transition to anticipatory business practices. And for years now, YouTube has been entirely reactionary. And it's blatantly obvious when you look at the things that they've done. You had the Adpocalypse 1.0, and then mass demonetization. You had you keep seeing these big things happen at YouTube, and then YouTube has to do damage control, and then YouTube has to do something about it. And up until that point, people had been clamoring over and over again, hey, this is a real problem, this is something that needs to be addressed, and they've been doing everything they could, and YouTube won't do anything until something big enough to warrant their attention happens. That is a reactionary management style. And that is exactly what this new program is. And that's how Hank Green actually explained it. And he explained it as it's not a reaction to the Logan Paul controversy. That is going to have another reactionary thing that will probably take a couple more months for them to implement. But this is in direct relation to, I don't know, you may have heard stories about the YouTube Kids app allowing really, really sick, perverted content on there because it used Disney characters and stuff like that. And again, because it's all done based on an algorithm and not an actual human being, kids were watching this really, really messed up stuff. And you also have the issue of people that are stealing content and re-uploading it. Hank Green specifically mentioned in a thing, people that steal and then re-upload one of his, I can't remember the name of his show now. I feel really bad. It's called like Sci Talk or something like that. It's one of the many shows that he does under the Nerd Fighter kind of umbrella that explains scientific type stuff. And it's all those series are really, really good. I actually auditioned to host one of them. So anyway, he specifically mentioned people stealing his content and re-uploading it. And this specific new partner program is designed to disenfranchise people from doing that. Because basically what happens is they get a lot of they get an initial a lot amount of money because they're putting good content out. It's just not their content, or they're gaming the system. Then they will get content ID strikes, or they will get community guideline strikes, and eventually the channel will be taken down, and then they'll just create a new channel and do the same thing over and over again. So the channel itself never accumulates a lot of views, and never accumulates a lot of subscribers because people don't actually want to watch this content. They just get tricked into watching it, not realizing that it's either stolen or that it's incredibly false advertising type things. And so that's what this is, according to Hank, that's what this is designed to prevent. And from a purely business and economical standpoint, it's not going to do that. Will it stop people from stealing and uploading content? No. Will it stop them from making money off of it? Maybe. It may mean that they just have to get more creative about how they steal it, which is very, very possible. If you're stealing long-form content and you get, 10,000, 15,000 views on on really long-form content, if you're stealing, like an episode of one of my D&D games, they last 2.5 hours. If I got, 10,000, 15,000 views on that, I would hit the 4,000 hours easily, instantly. I technically would only need 1,000 views on one of those to hit the 4,000, or technically 500 since they're 2 hours. But, so yeah, I don't think it's going to be effective in doing what Hank claims it's supposed to be doing, which is preventing these small channels that it's just going to change how they work is all. And that has been true about every other reactionary method that they have taken. The algorithm that they talk about is the reason why the YouTube Kids controversy happened, because people figured out how the algorithm worked and were able to game the system. And that's what's going to happen with this as well, is people are just going to find more creative ways to steal from people or to trick the system, you know, stuff like that. That's all this is going to do. And again, this is a reaction to major, major issues that people have been telling YouTube about, especially about stolen content and stuff like that. Like, there really hasn't been a good way for content creators that that are not backed by a major television network or you know, backed by Sony Music or something like that, someone really, really big. There hasn't been a really good way for them to make sure that their content isn't being stolen. There is a really good example of, I can't remember the channel, and I don't want to advertise it anyway, but they stole, they actually stole footage from Peanut Butter Gamer to use it in one of their top 10 lists, and then they got caught again stealing from another channel that I can't remember. Yeah, so I mean, there really isn't good things in place for content creators to be able to protect their content on YouTube, other than the DMCA system, which is massively flawed in itself because the law itself was written back in the 90s, a decade before YouTube was going to exist. And so the DMCA is such an archaic set of rules, and YouTube sticks so closely to the safe harbor provision of it that it's not really useful unless you have large amounts of money, because once the claim goes through, you DMCA someone, it immediately gets taken down whether or not you have the right to do it or not. And then as soon as they make a counterclaim, you can agree to it or not agree to it, and then you actually have to go to court for it. Like, YouTube washes their hand of the entire situation, and you have to go to court for it. And it's heavily weighted technically in favor of the person with the DMCA that makes the DMCA claim. However, it's weighted even more heavily towards people that can actually afford to litigate, which most YouTubers can't. So if the purpose of this was to curb that specific behavior, this is an incredibly ineffective way to do it, because there are so many ways to get around this. And we've already seen that when YouTube acts in a reactionary manner, that bad things happen. A perfect example of this is the channels that are getting really, really big right now are all drama-based channels or outrage-based channels. And that is the reason that the Logan Paul incident happened. And the reason these channels are getting big is because YouTube, in a reaction to the adpocalypse and in a reaction to their advertisers telling them that this is what they want, again, reactionary, 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 none of this is anticipatory, they started valuing view time over views themselves, which is not the worst thing in the world, and interaction. Not positive interaction, any interaction. If you get 400 comments on a video that all say, "You're a disgusting human being, why in the world would you put up content like this?" All of that counts in the algorithm as good. If you get 100,000 dislikes on a video, the algorithm counts that all as interaction, all as audience engagement, because the audience is engaging enough to hit the dislike button. Disliking a video does not make it less likely for people to view it. It actually makes it more likely for people to view it, because that's the thing that YouTube has been encouraging, is audience interaction, not good, positive audience interaction, just interaction in general. And when you focus just on interaction and you want to get people to just say something, to say something, it's significantly easier to create offensive content and get reactions than it is for you to make positive quality content and get reactions from that. And so the entire culture that we're seeing on YouTube of drama and outrage type stuff that eventually culminated in the Logan Paul incident is based entirely on YouTube reacting to, well, our advertisers want this and this and this, and so we're going to do this. So that's my first problem with this system. It's reactionary, not anticipatory. And that's what YouTube has been. And that is not a sustainable business model. The second issue with it goes entirely from an economic standpoint. And this is the part that was never mentioned on at least the part of the talk that I watched. It was not an incredibly long talk because Hank had other things that he had to do. But the crutch of it was nobody talked about economic principles or anything like that beyond people that the people that are affected by this we're not making a whole lot of money off of this. That's the entire point of this. Is the only people that are affected by this are the people that weren't really making a ton of money on YouTube anyways. But they never actually talked about real economics, things like market economy and the idea of two specific ideas in economic theory as far as market health and consumer rights and things like that, is this spectrum that they have for markets. And on one side of the spectrum is what's called perfect competition, which is where there's so much competition that the producer has very little control over the profit that they make. The consumer is the one that actually controls what products are made and things like that. It's a very consumer-friendly aspect. It doesn't actually exist. There isn't a single market in the world that is what's called perfect competition. It is economic theory. However, you can get closer and closer to perfect competition by passing certain laws and things like antitrust laws and anti-monopoly laws and stuff like that. On the other end of the spectrum is what's called a monopoly. Most people are familiar with the word monopoly. It's a board game. And most people are kind of familiar with what a monopoly is, which is where one company controls a market. There's actually two different kinds of monopolies that can exist. There's what's called a vertical monopoly, which is where a single company controls every aspect of manufacture of the product creation process, from manufacturing and raw goods creation all the way through to the consumer end, where the consumer is actually purchasing the process. That's called a vertical monopoly. That would kind of be like Microsoft's not only, making Windows, which is the operating system that PCs use and everything like that, but also making their own computers, owning silicon, owning the places that make motherboards and computer chips and circuits and things like that, going all the way down to owning copper mines and things like that, that they use for the copper wiring and everything like that. That is what would be considered a vertical monopoly. And when you have a vertical monopoly, you have the ability to control your costs so intensely that it can become very anti-consumer, because you can it doesn't matter what other competition there is in the market. If they all have to go through you in order to get the raw materials, you are the one that owns the market. Whether or not there's competition in it or not, you own the market, because you don't actually have to compete with anyone else for anything but the absolute end product. So that is a vertical monopoly. What most people think of in a monopoly is what's called a horizontal monopoly, which is where one company basically dominates an entire market, where the consumer has no choice. If they want a product from this market, they have to get it through this company. In the U.S. and most other countries, there are laws, they're called antitrust laws, and there are laws to prevent both vertical and horizontal monopolies. Because both of them are anti-consumer, they end up removing choice from the consumer and removing the ability for the consumer to have any impact on the market as a whole or in part. So just below monopoly, mono meaning one, you have what's called an oligopoly. An oligopoly is, instead of one person owning everything, you have a small group of people or producers that control the market. And we have oligopolies in the internet providers present technically a legal oligopoly. You see it in television as well. They have an oligopoly in that, where again it's such a small number of really big people. The entertainment industry is an oligopoly, again, albeit a legal oligopoly, because it doesn't go so far as to be completely impossible for new people to break in. So anyway, the thing that defines where you are on that, where a market is on that spectrum of perfect competition to monopoly, is basically two big factors. There is barrier to entry, which I'll explain in just a second, and there is how often new producers enter and exit that market. Those are the two factors, and there's I'm simplifying this because it's technically a really complex economic principle, but I'm simplifying it as much as I can to make this as easy to understand for people that don't actually care about economics, and so I can apply it to what YouTube is doing here. So barrier to entry is how difficult would it be for a new person to start up a business and compete with already established businesses in that market. To use something that everyone is familiar with, internet service providers. The reason they have a legal oligopoly right now is because the barrier to entry is incredibly high in that particular market. If I wanted to start up my own ISP, either I have to lay my own lines of cable, which first of all would be insanely expensive. Second of all, might be impossible for me to do based on city laws and things like that. Like there are laws that prevent me from just going around digging up places and laying my own line and stuff like that. So there is a significantly high barrier to entry to get into the internet service provider market. And there are ways to get around it a little bit, which is why they have a legal oligopoly. Things like you can technically pay to use someone else's lines so that you're using the same lines and everything like that. You're using the infrastructure that already exists, but you're providing your own service. But even that is an incredibly high barrier to entry. And the higher the barrier to entry, the more the closer you get to the monopoly side of that spectrum, the competitive spectrum. The other thing is how many companies are jumping in, are entering the market, how many new companies are entering the market, and how many old companies are leaving the market. In a perfect competition, this number approaches infinity, which is why it's a theoretical concept and it's not a real thing. Because in a perfect competition, there is zero barrier to entry, meaning anyone could enter this market with no problems whatsoever, and companies are entering and exiting the market so often that it approaches infinity. That's why, again, it doesn't exist, because we can't approach infinity. The reason that they look at how many businesses are entering and exiting the market is that gives an indication for the barrier to entry. And naturally, competition in general breeds quality and lowers prices. And so what that means is the more different businesses in the same market there are, the better the quality in that market is going to be, because they have to compete with each other. And the lower the price for the good is going to be, because again, they have to compete with each other. They are the supply side of supply and demand, and the consumers are the demand side. So the more supply there is, while there is a consistent demand, the lower the price gets. That's how economics works. It's the basics of price theory. In a highly competitive market, you constantly have new people coming in because there's a low barrier to entry, and you constantly have old people, old businesses moving out because they can no longer make a profit off of it, because there's so much competition in there that they simply couldn't get themselves into it. And so you'll have this constant shifting of, as the technology changes, as new innovations happen, you'll have this constantly shifting market of new producers and new things in this market. And that, again, that is perfect competition, which again doesn't exist. In monopoly, there isn't any turnover in producers. It's always the same producer. Oligopoly, there's very little turnover in producers. It's normally all the same producers, with every so often there'll be a new one that will come in and then an old one might leave, but it's very, very low. So that is, the competitive spectrum, the market competition spectrum. I don't know if that's what it's actually called. That's what I'm referencing it right now. I know there's an actual name for it. I can't remember it. The economic courses that I took, I took, a year and a half ago or 2 years. I aced them all. I did better on most of my economics courses than my professors. But I've never been really good at vocab. I understand practice a lot better than vocabulary. That's always how it's been. So anyway, how does this relate to this new program? Well, what YouTube has done is they have created an artificial barrier to entry, which is what governments do when they do things like antitrust laws and stuff like that. Those are designed to artificially influence the market. In a capitalist market, theoretically, the market self-regulates. However, there are ways to artificially influence the market or manufacture influence on the market. Monopolies are one way that you can artificially influence the market. Laws and things like that are another way you can artificially influence the market. Artificially influencing the market, which just means that it's manufactured. It's not a natural result of the market just balancing itself out. It is actually done on purpose to change how the market works. It is not an inherently bad or good thing. It is the purpose behind it that will define whether or not it's a positive or negative change on the market. Monopolies, again, in general, are going to be anti-consumer, but pro-producer, and antitrust laws and things like that are going to be technically, you could call them anti-producer, pro-consumer. And due to the fact that consumers are the one that generally need protection, because producers are the ones that actually have the power, because they're the ones creating the things that the consumers need, generally the government is going to create laws and things like that to help the consumer in a healthy market. So anyway, how does this relate back to YouTube? Well, they've created an artificial barrier to entry. They have now increased the barrier to entry, which shifts the, on that market competition spectrum, it shifts it more towards the monopoly side, and shifts it more to an oligopoly style market, which is inherently non-consumer friendly. So we're starting off by increasing the barrier to entry. That's also going to mean that the number of new creators that are going to come in and create new things, new producers in the markets, are going to decrease as well, whereas the ones that are already producing content and are already successful are going to find that they have less competition, and so the quality of their content is going to degrade. That's what happens when you have less competition, is quality almost universally tends to degrade because you no longer have to put that kind of quality in. So the reasoning that YouTube gave for this, and the reason that Hank gave as well, is this is designed to help content creators with getting rid of stuff that we don't want on the channel, and to help bring more advertisers back to YouTube by increasing the quality. If you look at actual economic theory, it's going to do the exact opposite. It's going to increase the barrier to entry, which is going to disenfranchise new people to enter the market, and it's going to decrease competition because the people that are already making money off this, the people like Logan Paul, like drama channels and things like that, that are already making a lot of money and views and things like that, are not going to have any incentive to change or anything. And they're not even going to have any incentive to continue to make their content better because there are less people that are going to be entering the market. There are less content creators that are going to be entering the market because they've just been disenfranchised. So they no longer have to worry about competing with as many other channels that could become big. It's just the barrier to entry has been raised, and so that also is going to affect new entry into the market and people exiting the market, which is, again, an indication of a healthy, competitive economic market. So, yes, this whole idea is based on really bad reactionary management decisions that are going to incentivize the wrong things. They're going to incentivize people to steal longer form content instead of shorter form content. So if all you make is shorter form content, your content is probably going to be safe because it's not as valuable to them anymore. And it hasn't been for a little while. But just, people that steal stuff, if they just stole a lot of short form content, they could get the good, they could get, make a lot of money off of it. Now, theft is going to be focused a lot more on long-form content. And they're just going to have to find ways around the algorithm because, again, manual curation is something that YouTube vehemently refuses to do for a number of reasons. Some of them logistics-based, like having that, having a staff large enough to actually manually curate would cost billions of dollars, which would create, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of jobs. But again, Google has to pay all these people to do that. And it's much, much cheaper for them to just have a computer program that auto does it. So people are going to learn how to trick the program by either, the most flagrant example that you see all the time is they simply change the pitch. Because the auto content ID will look for exact matches, and if you just increase the pitch, it will no longer have an exact match because the waveforms are different. So you'll see that, or you will see they will crop the image and zoom it so that you still get the same content, but it looks different, and so the visual aspect of this auto content ID system won't be triggered because it's not the exact same image, despite the fact that it is the exact same content, I mean. And again, they're still incentivizing view duration and interaction. Interaction is their biggest metric, and interaction is any and all comments. It doesn't care what kind of comments you get as long as you get comments. And likes and dislikes both count the same way. So likes and dislikes, as long as someone is clicking one of those two buttons, then you are going to be given better ads. You're going to be given more time being recommended to other channels, things like that. It feeds itself. And that specific market lends itself towards drama-based, outrage-based content, which is what we've been seeing over the last few years, is all these people doing really stupid things or really controversial things to get reactions out of people, because that's what gets interactions. They want a reaction. It's much easier to get a reaction from someone by insulting them than it is by creating something insightful that makes them think. And that's what the YouTube market is going to move towards. And this is just another example of incentivizing that even more. They are now creating a barrier to entry. So voices like myself can't actually compete with them. The other thing they didn't really mention that I saw, I think there was a couple things about whether or not videos that aren't part of the partner program are going to get advertised through YouTube, where they get recommended, and that's how you get organic channel growth, is by your video showing up in the recommended tab of other videos. So what that means for them is either, and they haven't really explained this to my knowledge, either they're going to still run ads on everything, unless it gets demonetized, but they're just going to take all the money from those ads, which would be incredibly unethical, and I would have a lot of problems with that if that is what's happening. They haven't clarified. Or they're simply not going to run ads on non-partnered content, which also means that they now have an incentive to push partnered content over non-partnered content. And they've always had an incentive to push monetized content over non-monetized content because they don't make any money off of non-monetized content, or they don't make direct money off of non-monetized content. They make money off of monetized content. So this new program, again, is going to, whether or not they say that they're going to, yes, that's not going to affecting in search rankings or anything like that. It is, because they have an incentive that they have created to push partnered content. They aren't going to make any money off of the content that is now non-partnered. And so not only is there a barrier to entry where you can't get paid for it, so there's no longer a monetary incentive for people to start YouTube, there's also the barrier to entry that they're not going to show your videos, or they don't have an incentive to show new content creators over established ones, because either they're not going to make any money off of it, or they are going to be making money off of it, but they're going to be doing it in an incredibly unethical way. By making money off of this content and not paying the people that created the content, which could open them up to legal difficulties in the future. So whichever path they decide to go, that is what, from economic theory and from a business management standpoint, that is what they are doing right now. They are doing a reactionary business management strategy, which they have been doing for a number of years now, which is not a sustainable business management strategy. It always marks the end of a business. I know this personally because one of the businesses I used to work for no longer exists because they became a reactionary. They focused on reactionary measures as opposed to anticipatory measures, and the company folded and was bought out by their biggest competitor. So that's again, you see this happen in the market all the time, and it's very, very common for businesses to close because of this reactionary management process, and they are shifting the market towards oligopoly by creating technically two different artificial barriers to entry. That are going to disenfranchise people from creating new content and from entering the market on two different fronts, on a monetary front and on the idea that even if they do enter the market, they're going to be fighting an uphill battle to even get their content out there. And then there's other issues as well, like the fact that if you're not a partner, you can't do external links. You can't link to your Patreon and cards and stuff like that. Which is a really, really big deal, because that's another way that you can, sustain this. It is not cheap to be a YouTuber. The program that I used to use to edit my footage that I can't devote the time to anymore costs me, I do a subscription for it. It costs me like $22, $23 a month for that. Webcams and good quality sound material and good lighting and stuff like that all of those, a cheap, decent enough webcam, which I do not have, is $100. To get a good quality like DSLR, which is what most of the professionals use, you're looking at anywhere from $600 to like $2 to $3 grand. And then lighting itself is going to run you anywhere from, I don't know, maybe like $50 up to, you know, a couple $100 for that. A good quality mic is going to run you at least $150 to $600, depending on what you're using the mic for. Editing software and stuff like that is very expensive. Sound editing software is very expensive. All of this stuff is already a barrier to entry. And now they're creating an additional barrier to entry by removing monetization. Even small amounts of monetization still could be useful, and other things like that. So anyway, that is the economic impact of what this change is going to have. And we're going to see it over the next year. Economics in general, and management in general, and business in general is not an instant gratification style thing. You do not see the results of your decisions within a week or within 2 weeks or even within a month. Generally, to see what the actual impact of your business decisions are, you need a minimum of 6 months to a year to see the actual benefits or harm that a business decision has made. And if you are in a reactionary mindset, by the time a year has passed, you are already so far past the point that you can fix it that you have no choice but to continue to have bad idea after bad idea, because you are constantly making up for the reactionary mistakes that you made before, because you simply can't react fast enough. Business doesn't work that way. You are reacting to business decisions that were made 6 months to a year ago minimum. Sometimes you are reacting to business decisions that were made, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago. Because that's just how business works. It's so big and it's so large that decisions themselves take a long time to actually affect the market. So anyway, yes, that is a lot of economic theory and stuff about this problem, and why I am vehemently opposed to it. Now, full disclosure, again, I've told you, I am being demonetized. I am having my partner status revoked. I have I have a horse in this race. I have a bias. I am one of the people that is losing the abysmally small amount of revenue that I did make from this. Full disclosure, I have not even made enough revenue in the 3 years I've been monetizing my content. I have not even made enough revenue to receive my first check from YouTube. So again, while I do have a horse in this race, it's a pretty flimsy horse. But I do want to mention that I have a bias in this, so that you guys can understand. But everything else I've talked about here is pure economic theory. This is pure management. This is generally accepted management practices and things like that I have learned actually being a manager, actually watching the market change. I was in retail management for about 5 years. So again, compared to people that have spent 20, 30 years in management, it may not sound like a lot, but in 5 years, I saw massive changes happen. I was given much more authority and control than a manager with my experience probably should have been given. And because of that, I was able to learn very, very quickly how to monitor change, how to make good business decisions and things like that, the dangers of a reactionary management environment. All of those things I got to learn because despite my technical lack of experience, I was still given positions of authority and things like that where I had a lot of control. So yes, again, I'm going to be making another video about personal stuff and posting it later today, I hope. I don't know. but I did want to get this out. Mr. Green, if you are watching this, I'm going to tweet this at you. If you have watched this to the end, congratulations, you have just spent a lot of time listening to stuff that you probably know a fair amount about, because again, you do run your own business, so you probably are familiar with a lot of the concepts that I have put forth here. You just didn't mention any of them in that conversation, and that was the thing that surprised me the most. I'm always going to approach everything from a business standpoint, because that's what YouTube is. It is a business. And if you want change to happen, you need to make sure that you're speaking the same language as the people you want to change. And in YouTube's case, that means you need to speak business. And you didn't. You spoke much more about, people stealing your content, and stuff like that, like, content, stealing and the wrong type of content being on there. And you mentioned nothing. You really didn't go into any details about the actual business side, which is all YouTube cares about, because it is a business. So, again, that entire hangout in my mind just seemed like a way to placate people that are now losing a source of income because of a bad business decision. It really felt like that you, Mr. Green, if you are watching this, you were trying to take a bullet for YouTube, which doesn't make sense to me, because of all your other actions have all been very much about protecting the creator, and not protecting YouTube as a company. So anyway, if you are watching this, I sincerely appreciate you watching it. I do hold you in the highest of regards and esteem, because of your expertise on this matter, and because you, from my understanding and my interpretation of your actions and your statements, I believe you to be a genuinely good person. And I believe you to be a genuinely good businessman, not just a successful businessman, which I think is fairly obvious, but a good one. Someone who actually cares about their employees, cares about business ethics and things like that. That is something that is rare to find in this current business climate. So please do not take any of this as a personal attack or anything like that. However, I do believe that you have misread this situation and you have not taken into account some very, very important aspects of this that will come to harm YouTube as a whole. And because you do make your money, some of your money, not all of it, some of your money off of YouTube is going to end up hurting you, just as much as it's hurting me right now. Probably technically a lot more so, because again, I haven't technically made any money off of this. It's, sitting in an account waiting to be paid out to me when I hit the right threshold. Which the other thing is, all the money that I've made, I'm not going to say the exact amount, but again, it's not enough to get my paycheck. I don't know where that goes. Does YouTube just go, well, it's ours now? Like they didn't actually tell me if I'm actually going to ever get paid the money that I earned on this, because I haven't hit that threshold. So anyway, for everybody else, thank you for watching. Again, this is a very long video because it's a very complicated topic, and I wanted to try and explain this in a way that is as simple as is possible for a very complex situation and a very technically complicated set of ideas. Economics is not easy. Economics is not simple. And business management, again, is not easy or simple. And understanding the thought processes and theories behind business management, again, is incredibly difficult. So I hope that this has helped explain why this, in my opinion, from a business perspective, this is such a bad idea, and why YouTube continues to degrade over time. And if anyone from YouTube is watching this, I will tag you guys too. I sincerely doubt anyone will watch this there. You guys have a huge problem. You do. You are reacting instead of anticipating. And the longer you stay reacting instead of anticipating, the worse things are going to get for you. The purpose of your reactions should be to get you to an anticipation style management system. It should not be continual or perpetual. That is how businesses end. And from what we've seen over the last couple of years here, YouTube, as much as the platform itself is growing exponentially, you guys are continuing to have issues being able to get advertisers, being able to get content creators, things like that. You are coming into very, very difficult times if you continue along the path that you are going on. So anyway, that's all for me. I will see you guys next time. All right? Bye-bye.